What up, what up, what up? Today is day number 2 of our Lessons in Luke Bible study that we are doing together, and we are in Luke chapter 2 on today. Let me just take a minute to say thank you for watching this video, and thank you to all of you who are participating in this Bible reading challenge that we're doing together throughout the month of December. I'm super thankful and encouraged by all of you, and I'm just excited to keep doing this. Now, you'll remember on yesterday, we talked about how one of the big themes that we're going to continue to see in the Gospel of Luke is this idea of subverting our expectations. God taking what we might assume is going to happen and turning it on its head. And we see that immediately as we jump in to Luke chapter 2. You'll remember in Luke chapter 1, when the angel Gabriel appears to Mary, he tells her that this son she is going to bear is going to be called the Son of the Most High, and that God is going to give this son the throne of his father David, and he will reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there will be no end. So we get introduced to the idea of this Jesus as the Son of God, the King of Kings, this one who's going to reign over everything. And immediately in chapter 2, we see this King of Kings laid in a feeding trough. That's not where you expect a king to be laid. But in chapter 2, right, as we read together, after Mary has her son Jesus, it says she wraps him in swaddling cloths and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. Or maybe your translation says in the guest room. Right? We don't have to get into right now whether it was literally a stable that Jesus was born in, as is often depicted, or more likely if it was in a lower chamber of a house because there was no room in the guest rooms that they were supposed to be staying in. But regardless of where they were located, the King of Kings was laid in the feeding trough where the animals eat. I don't know if you know anything about animals, but when they eat, it ends up coming back out too, right? That's all animals. That's us included. But when we talk about animals that are out in the fields normally, right? Livestock, they have a smell to them. I don't know if you're familiar, right, with animals, but you know when you're around animals, and you know when animals have been around. And that is where Jesus is laid at, is in this feeding trough where the animals would ordinarily be at. This is not what you expect for a king. And then who is it that comes and worships this king, right? The angels, who we would expect to see, right? Messengers of God, they come on the scene, but instead of worshiping Jesus themselves, they go get somebody else to worship him. And who is it? It's the blue-collar workers. It's the shepherds working out in the fields. They don't go to the religious elite in Jerusalem. They go to the average workers, the run-of-the-mill folk, and they say, hey, something is happening today in Bethlehem, in the city of David, that you need to see. And it's those men, the average folks doing their work, who go and worship Jesus first. Then what happens directly after this? After 40 days have passed, Mary takes her son Jesus to the temple to be dedicated, as was the custom of the Old Testament. Not only so that her son could be dedicated to the Lord, but also that she could be purified ceremonially. And we see in verse 24, right, as they go to the temple there in Luke chapter 2, that they offer a sacrifice of a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. And this comes directly out of the Old Testament. This comes directly out of the book of Leviticus, where in this purification ritual, it was ordinarily a lamb that was to be presented. But if they could not afford a lamb, it was 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. So this tells us again, this King of Kings, this Lord of Lords, this Son of God is born to some poor folk, some average folk, some people who couldn't even afford the lamb for the sacrifice. This is not what you expect. Then what happens when they're there in the temple? Some random old dude comes and grabs Jesus. He's a prophet of the Lord who has been told by God he will not taste death until he sees the coming of the Messiah. This random old man grabs Jesus and he says, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, right? He sees Jesus and he says, this is what I've been waiting for. Now I can die. Now I can rest happy because I have seen the coming of Messiah. ain't the kind of guy you're expecting. It's not the priest who's dedicating Jesus. It's some random old man that says, this is the guy. And then likewise, another person by the name of Anna, who is described as a prophetess there at the temple, she too starts to say, man, this is the guy we've been waiting for when it comes to Jesus. Then that final snapshot that we see here in chapter 2 of the Gospel of Luke, as Jesus enters into the temple at the age of 12, right? They're there in Jerusalem for the Passover feast. And while there, he separates from his parents who think he's still with their family. So they leave town trying to go back home, and he stays in Jerusalem. And it's said that he is there asking questions of the teachers in the temple, and all are marveling at his answers that he has to these questions. The questions he's asking them, the questions they're asking him. You don't expect to see a 12-year-old boy dumbfounding the teachers of the law, but that's exactly what we see. We see this young man, Jesus, already laying the groundwork for some amazing things that are going to happen. Thanks for being here today. Keep reading with us. Keep going with us. I know it's going to get deeper and deeper each and every day. I love you. God loves you. Be blessed.